Hello, everybody, and welcome to my first episode of Women in Tech. And today I've got with me Nancy, and Nancy is a marketing innovator, writer, speaker, and machine embracer for more than 3 decades. She's also the writer of Embrace the Machine, which is available on digital download or a book as well. And I'm really excited to work with Nancy on this particular episode. We've already had a little chat about Nancy's background and all the incredible things that she's achieved. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's, already rocked the C-suite, and I'm really excited for her to share some of the things that she's passionate about with you today. So, Nancy, first of all, I just want to ask, what is it that you love most about what you do?
Um, Whoa. Well, first of all, Ellen, thanks for having me on your first show. I'm flattered. I have always loved the diversity of projects that I've worked on. That's been a constant. I love creating new things. I've always asked the question why when companies are stuck or they're looking to scale. I'm ultimately passionate about the consumer, whether that's a business consumer or a lifestyle product consumer, because I think that, as one of my marketing professors once said, if you speak with the voice of the customer, you can never be wrong. And that applies very much to the evolution of technology, because developing a product or a service without an end use in mind is, as I like to say, just a bunch of blah blah, that you really have to begin with what consumer problem or what business problem is this technology solving.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it kind of speaks to what we were talking about what it means to be a woman in tech. So I'd really love for you to share what it means to you to be a woman in tech.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize that I was a woman in tech until I started working about 4 years ago in the marketing technology space. I always saw myself as a creator and a writer and a brand innovator. But when I started looking back at some of my early jobs, I have always had a huge tech component in everything I did, whether it was my early days in the publishing industry or my years in fintech for Citibank and MasterCard. Even though I worked in a marketing function, it revolved around how do you take a technology and bring it to the masses, whether that was the early days of the ATM or home banking, or at MasterCard when we were looking to create the first digital currency, which is now, of course, blockchain and Bitcoin. But because I worked in marketing, communications, and branding, I never really saw myself as a woman in tech. But working in marketing technology and taking my content that I wrote and using it to generate leads and sales. And I used to write a column for Inc.com called Bots and Bodies about the human side of technology. I came to realize that in many ways, I was as much a technologist as I am a marketer. And I think that is one of the perceptions that we need to change going forward, is that even if you don't know how to code, you can be a woman in tech.
Thank you. And we also talked about the fact that you mentor other women who are kind of seeing the challenges of working in an environment that perhaps is either male dominated or they feel is not as inclusive or as creative as they imagined it might be or that it could be. But along the way, did you have any guidance or mentors that helped you to get where you have? And you've obviously launched many businesses as well. So I'm quite interested to see who's helped you along the way.
And I hate to admit this, but most of my most influential mentors have been men who, and again, I was forming my career in a very different era, and many women were too insecure or too threatened to bring young women along with them.
Mhm.
I think that's changed, and I think just even evidenced by what you're doing in building a community is women don't feel as alone as they may have felt in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And unfortunately, a lot of the women in my workplace were emulating male work styles, and that's how they were getting ahead. And that's sort of what they had to do during that era. And one of the things that I've learned over time is that it is possible, as I like to say, to combine your feminine side with your fierce side. And it's possible to be an agent of change without being a bully, or without being mannish, or without tearing down other people. It just requires, the word tenacity was used a lot on my performance appraisals. And it's really a matter of learning how to negotiate, learning how to align yourself with the people who are the decision makers, the people who can build your career. And it's not to say that I haven't had any women mentors. I think that everybody I've worked with over the years, I've taken a little something away. And not only from the people I've worked for, but the people who work for and with me. I'm doing a big project right now, and my clients are both in their 20s, and I ask them a lot of questions. I don't do what I've recently coined gensplaining. It's like mansplaining, except it's,
Generational
assuming
thing,
that
yeah.
people of a certain generation won't get something. It's really all about that collaboration and listening and trust, and being, as one of my former bosses used to say, just being a human sponge and realizing that you have something to learn from everybody in your circle.
Wow, there's some really great tips there for women who are looking to get into technology or to grow their career in technology. So where do you see the next 10 years taking us, especially with, we're having this pandemic at the moment and technology is moving at such a fast pace. And as you said, we've talked about organizations thinking about profit with purpose. I'm just wondering where you see technology taking us in the next 10 years.
Well, where I would love to see technology take us, as you and I were discussing earlier, it's not technology for technology's sake. It's technology that leads to the betterment of human existence and the sustainability of the planet and the sustainability of companies. Um, I am hoping, and this is not so much a prediction as it is a hope, that the world of technology will become more inclusive. And by that, I don't just mean gender and race. I also mean age. As somebody who has worked in technology for most of my career, the better part of 40 years, I do see an inherent bias against older people. And admittedly, many of us have missed the, not present company excluded, have missed the tech memo. My next book, in fact, is going to be about how to remain relevant after 50. And I do think that women over 50 are the invisible, or we're the hidden figures of this next evolution. But my mother is going to be 94 next month, and I see firsthand how technology can contribute to life expectancy and life quality, everything from voice to data sharing to emergency response systems to telemedicine. And those developments will only come about in an inclusive development environment if the people who are creating products are only creating products for people like them, then we're not realizing the full potential of AI, machine learning, and robotics.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you don't have a diverse team, you can't create a product or service that's going to be representative of the people you're trying to support and serve.
Exactly, and that doesn't even take into account the expenses saved from fighting discrimination lawsuits, and those numbers are staggering, both um, sexism, ageism, across the board. But at a very early age, I learned a couple of important lessons from my corporate career. I was once building out a new marketing services department, And I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s, and I had a traffic director who was in her 60s. And it was a new experience for me, having somebody who was twice my age reporting into me, but she was clearly the best person for the job. And I hired her because she was so calm and unflappable, and we were juggling hundreds of projects at a time, and she just had it down pat. And I think as we all start to recover from the pandemic, companies are going to need to make some very tough choices in terms of what kind of talent they hire, what kind of talent they keep. And I've had to experience that as well. When I was at Citibank, I was in the midst of a downsizing, and I had to take a department that had previously been run by over 100 people and distill it down to fewer than 10.
Wow.
So when you're put in that position, you have to make difficult choices, and you look to hire people who are not necessarily specialists, but are multifaceted and multi-talented. So I'm hoping that that does lead to a renaissance of sorts, where as companies are making decisions around who are the best hires, they will be age blind, race blind, gender blind, and just look at the candidate as
Yeah.
opposed to the profile. And that is something that scares me a little bit about AI and ML based hiring, that if somebody looks at the year I graduated, if a machine looks at the year I graduated college, they may just automatically dismiss me thinking that I'm a dinosaur. Whereas we need to make sure that as we're programming our AI powered machines, that they don't have the same biases that humans have had for years.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it. It's often an unconscious bias as well, or some people call it subconscious bias. I think I've heard other references for that. But yeah, I mean, that is why it's so important, again, to be thinking about when we're designing models and designing technology in general, that we have a diverse team designing it, because otherwise you're not going to be considering and challenging your viewpoints. Thank you so much, Nancy. And I really love that kind of just at the end there, be fearless and just keep inspiring. So thank you so much for joining me on
Thank
today's
you
phone.
so much too. This has been
Great.
great.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.